Okay, I hope you're all well, inshallah. Hope you guys have all had a good week. Okay, so what I will do, inshallah, I will just have a quick recap from last week, and then we move into this week, inshallah. So last week was really a brief introduction to the systems. Show you the slide. This is what we looked at. We looked at the economic system per se in economics. So we had a bit of a discussion of what is economics, what economic systems are trying to do. And probably the main slide from last week, brothers and sisters, probably this one or the one that looks similar to it. We looked at human needs, what they are. We looked at how capitalism and Islam both look at them from a systemic perspective. We had a look at how both systems or ideologies or economic systems look at the economic problem. And then we had a look at how both economic systems deal with addressing the key challenges in the economic system. So like last time, brothers and sisters, we'll have a Q&A after my presentation. Feel free to put your questions on the chat or any comments, inshallah. Then I can run through them at the end. Or if you want, I can give you the mic and you can ask your questions or make any comments, inshallah. So we ended at this particular slide, inshallah. And really, brothers and sisters, the key aspect of the Islamic economic system is ownership. If ever you study Islamic economics, if you study historically how they understood economics, if you study economics today, really a chunk or probably the biggest part of Islamic economics is the issue of ownership, how you acquire ownership, how you dispose of it. This actually makes up a large chunk of Islam. I would even say probably over 50%, maybe 60 to 70% of Islamic economics is really a discussion of ownership. And that's what we will do today. Today's session, inshallah, is the second out of our 5. And we'll have a look at Islam and ownership. And this section probably it impacts all of us. If we were living in Islamic economy, then this would be absolutely critical. How do you own? How do you dispose of your ownership? What are you allowed to own? These sort of things. It has a massive impact on your life. It still has an impact today. You know, we're Muslims. We are obliged to stick to the halal and haram when it comes to economy, when it comes to transactions. So this is still applicable to us today, although, really most countries in the world that do purport to be Islamic, they implement bits and bobs of Islamic economy. Now, many brothers and sisters, when they look at the Islamic economic system, what they see is some very common things. They see charity, they see zakat, and what they see is many things that are haram. What they see is many people do view Islamic economics as a list of do's and don'ts, a list of things you're allowed to own and a list of things you're not allowed to own. But what you find, brothers and sisters, is when it comes to increasing how much wealth you have, when it comes to increasing the size of your cake, if you want to call it, Islam really interferes in this area. The Islamic system is all about what are the different ways to acquire, what are the different ways to become or come into ownership of things, and then how you dispose of this. So for example, wine, alcohol, and prostitution are haram. Those are 2 examples. Whilst trading and buying chocolate, for example, or buying a car, these are things that are halal. So the Islamic economic system is really all about, you've got wealth, how do we transfer this from one person to another? Because in every transaction, someone is buying and someone is selling. So this is the area Islamic economic system has set up a whole architecture for. When it comes to you've got wealth, how do you increase it? How do you make it more? this Islam views as a technical subject. This is a scientific discussion. How to use AI to become more efficient, how to use technology to make your agriculture or your farming more effective. This is what we call economic science, and this is not the area Islam has a system for. This is an area which Islam says everything's permissible. Really, the area Islam gets involved in is what we're going to talk about now. So the image I've got here, you've got mining, you've got industry. Again, these are scientific areas. Really, what Islam interested in is you've got a society, you've got people. How do you buy and sell? How do you acquire? How do you transfer wealth? This is the area Islamic economics is all about, and that's what we'll have a look at today. So if broadly speaking, brothers and sisters, if we look at the Sharia, we look at the Hukm Shari, you can divide ownership into three categories. I couldn't find the term. In Islam, we call owning things or owning wealth, we call it mal. I couldn't find an accurate term for this in English, so the best I've come up with is property. So although in English, property usually means real estate, means a home, I mean property here in a broad sense, in terms of all wealth, so assets, money, jewelry, everything. So really, you can categorize this into three. Now, what we're going to look at in detail now, inshallah, in today is private property. But just to explain the others, private property is the right of the lawgiver for one to own and dispose of something, like in trade. So private ownership is exactly that. It's what can I as an individual own? That's what it is about, and we'll have a look at that. While state property, the third option in front of you, this is really all about a government. They collect taxes and they are allowed to spend those taxes as they see fit. And this is called state property. It doesn't mean the state actually owns it. It just means the state has the right how it spends it. So we're talking here about taxes, the taxes that are collected. We're talking here about state buildings, these sort of things. That's what state property is. And public property, we'll have a look at what that actually, and that's a very important concept in Islamic economics. So here's two hadiths for you. And both of these hadith are alluding to the same thing. The Muslims are partners and associates in three things: the water, pasture, and the fire. And in another hadith, similar wording, three things are not prevented from the people: the water, the pasture, and the fire. And there's a few things we learn from this. We learn the first thing, that these are the basic needs of all people. Islam views food, clothing, shelter as a basic need of the people. And what these hadiths are saying is that because water is water, and because the pastures are the pastures, and because the fire is the fire, these are owned collectively by the people, i.e., that these should not be held from people, and these should not be individually owned by people. So what we get from these hadith is it's not allowed for one individual to own pastures. It's not allowed for them to own the water resources. However, what we see is at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, these were owned by individuals. So for example, the Prophet ﷺ, he actually consented to people in Khaybar and to people in Taif to own their own wells, their own water wells, so they can drink from it. He allowed them to own their water wells for their cattle and their livestock. He didn't actually prevent them from actually owning it. So we have a bit of a conflict here. You have hadith that says these should be owned by individuals, these are collectively owned, but we see that the Prophet ﷺ, he allowed this. And this next hadith, it puts this into perspective for us. In case you didn't notice, brothers and sisters, the picture on the right is a salt mine. It's a mine that's full of salt. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but it's relevant to this third hadith here. So in the third hadith, what you find is this particular Sahaba, he called on the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, and he asked him to allocate to him a salt mine, and the Prophet allocated it to him. And when he turned away, another man came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said that, do you know what you have allotted to him? Do you realize what you've done? That verily you have allotted to him a replenishable water. So the Prophet ﷺ, he took it back. So what we understand from this hadith is salt is allowed to be owned, but what this was a salt mine. So it had lots of salt in there that the people would need. And the Prophet gave it to the individual, he asked for it. So that means owning salt is permissible. But when the Prophet was told that this is replenishable, i.e. of a huge amount, the Prophet took it back. So what we understand from this hadith and the way we reconcile them is that water is allowed to be owned by individuals. However, if it's very large, if it's something the community needs in order to live as a community, without it, they won't be able to live there, then it's not allowed to be owned. Then it is a public property. So what this means, brothers and sisters, is although water is allowed to be owned, although you can own your farmland, although you can own fire-based resources, if these are of large amounts, if these are of amounts that people who live in that area won't be able to live there, if it wasn't available, then these are public property. So what this means is they are not allowed to be owned by individuals. They're owned collectively by the people, and they should be available for the people to use. Now, these hadith, brothers and sisters, obviously they were revealed at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and it was normal then for people to travel. The desert Arabs were Bedouins. They used to travel around. They used to travel in their camps. So for them to survive, obviously they had to make use of whatever water resources they came across. They obviously needed water for their livestock. And anybody who wanted to use land needed water as well. So what you find is that these hadith were really relevant for that time. And from the context these hadith were revealed in, what we come to realize is any item that is needed for community survival, that without it, they won't be able to live there, then this is a public property. So this would mean in today's context, brothers and sisters, all the major oil resources, natural gas, all these key mineral wealth, these are not allowed to be privatized in private hands. These are essential. I would even say, electricity, if there's no electricity in an area, you can't live there. If there's no permanent electricity, when a new area is built anywhere, what they do is they excavate the land, they bring in the electrical cables, and then they build upon that. Without electricity in modern days, you physically can't operate. So this is public properties. It makes things very interesting. It's quite a unique principle. So, you've got public property, which is, this is available for the public, managed by the state. You've got state property, which is the taxes they collect and the buildings and the administration. And state property is anything where the state is allowed to dispose of it as they want. Private property is, inshallah, what we're going to look at now. Now, brothers, when we look at private property and we look at the different ways you can gain ownership, and if we look at the Sharia as a whole, if you get all the ayahs that talk about ownership and disposal of ownership, they fall into these 5 categories. And we look at all of these in detail, and this is really the heart of ownership. Work, inheritance, subsistence, fiscal transfer, and wealth handover. These are the 5 means of ownership that Islam has codified for people acquiring wealth and for people disposing of wealth. And we'll go through these, inshallah, all in a bit of detail. So probably out of these 5, brothers and sisters, the top one, work, is probably the most relevant for us. And it's probably going to be like 90% of how people acquire their wealth. So when we look at wealth, brothers and sisters, we can see there's many, many different ways you can work and acquire wealth. So the first of these is you can cultivate land. So this is about planting on land. This is about building upon it. In fact, there are many, many hadith that talk about if somebody finds a land that nobody's using, that it can be utilized. And if nobody's using it, there's no signs of use, you can actually take it over. So you've got hadith that say whoever cultivated a dead land, it becomes his. Whoever encircled a land by a fence, it becomes his. And whoever gets his hand over something ahead of any other Muslim, it is his. This is in the context of land. And you find, brothers, in the Hukm Shari, there are many, many ayahs and hadith that talk about land, the rules of land. And if you think about most of human history, the economics or the economy was really all about how to use land, utilizing of land. We lived in an agrarian age for most of human history. So Islam has got lots and lots of details about land, the rules of land, the taxation on land. So the second way of work is extraction. This is extracting whatever exists in the earth, whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put there. So you've got a hadith I've got here that the Prophet of Allah was asked about the lugatha, a thing which is picked from the ground. And he said, if it was picked from a used road or uninhabited village, you have to describe it and announce it for 1 year. If its owner is identified, it's restored to him. Otherwise, it's yours. But if it was not picked from a used road or uninhabited road, then you have to pay a fifth of it and its treasure. So what it's saying here is anything that comes out of the ground in terms of resources, minerals, gems, metals, these can be owned. So from here, we understand that actually getting things out of the ground, this is a type of work, and this is a type of work Islam has permitted. Then you have hunting, brothers and sisters. So this is, hunting for fish, pearls, corals, and other prey, birds, animals, and other things that are hunted on land that are permissible from other evidences. So just to quote you a hadith, in a hadith narrated by Ibn Majah, I came to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu and said, "O Prophet of Allah, we are in a hunting land. I hunt by arrow and my trained dog and with my untrained dog. So tell me which of these is allowed for me." And he replied, "As for what you mentioned that you are in a hunting land, so what you hunted by your arrow and mentioned on it the name of Allah, eat of it. And what you hunted by your trained dog and mentioned on it the name of Allah, eat of it. And that which you hunted by your untrained dog and you got it before his death and slaughtered it, eat of it." So what this is telling us is hunting is permissible in Islam. So I don't think hunting happens today like it used to happen in the past. What you find today is the production, processing, manufacturing of food is done professionally. And so what you find is, food is done at an industrial level. But this is all permissible. It's permissible to hunt. So this is a type of work that Islam permits. Then you have brokerage. A broker is a person who is employed by other people to buy and sell on this behalf. There's many hadith of this. The Prophet ﷺ even employed people to work on his behalf. They can work on a temporary basis. They can work on a permanent basis. All of this is permissible from Islam. Then you have partnership. And partnership, brothers and sisters, is the foundation of company structure in Islam. It's built upon the concept of partnership. So a partnership at its very basic level, brothers and sisters, is where two people or more, they come together and they participate in a trade. So one partner puts the money in, puts the capital in, and then the other one actually works with it. So to quote you a hadith, let me just find it. So it's narrated that when Ali Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, when he handed a property as Madara Bar, he used to stipulate on the Madarib not to travel with it by sea, not to descend a valley, nor to trade with live things. Otherwise, he would have to guarantee the losses incurred. The Prophet of Allah became aware of this and he approved of it. So going into a partnership with someone where one person puts money in and the other one takes it, this is allowed. This is a permissible form of acquiring wealth, and we call this partnership. And partnership is the foundations of company structure, which we'll have a look at in a second. Sharecropping is permissible in Islam. Sharecropping in Islam is a bit different to how it was historically. This is where one person hands over his trees to another person in order to irrigate them and tend to them in return for a defined portion of their fruit. So the Prophet ﷺ, he contracted the people of Khaybar over half of what they produce. So this shows us it's a legitimate form of ownership. And the final one is an employee. So this is where you employ someone and they work for you directly and you pay them a fixed wage. Yeah, you agree this in advance. The Prophet ﷺ was aware of this. Many of the Sahaba did it and he approved of it. So if you look at all of these, brothers and sisters, probably employee is where most people fall into today. I mean, you've got a lot of people that may be involved in the partnership, Depending on what part of the world you're from, you might be into hunting or even the cultivation of land. Now, when we look at the concept of employee, brothers and sisters, in Islam, it's very, very simple. When you're employing someone, what you're doing is you're actually hiring them. What you're doing is you're paying them for the skill they're bringing to the role that you want. So if I employ someone to design a video for me, what I'm doing is I'm hiring that skill. So we agree a wage, and this is a legitimate form of hiring. So in Islam, being an employee is what we call ijara. And ijara is what's called hiring. And you can even argue to some degree it's leasing as well. So with this, brothers and sisters, come many, many, many rules. Many rules. There's rules for paying them a decent wage. Your employee has rights. You have rights over them. There's other issues that come in terms of losses, who incurs them. And just to go through some of the rules, although hiring is permissible, brothers and sisters, there are certain things that are haram to hire over. Because somebody could argue, I just want to make money, so I'm going to employ someone whose job is to make money for me. Now, because that person does the actions, that person's the employee, I'm not doing the haram action. But we see here, for example, 10 people are cursed when it comes to alcohol. So not only the one who drinks alcohol, but the one who presses it, the one who asks for it, the one who carries it, all of these are haram. And what this hadith indicates to us is it's not someone else is doing the job. That person is doing the job on your behalf. They're doing it for you. So whatever's haram for you, it's also haram for you to earn money from that way as well. So the best example here is the second hadith you got of riba. This is the famous one. The Prophet ﷺ, he said he curses the one who takes riba, the one who gives it, the one who records it, and the one who witnesses it. So nobody could argue, well, it's not me who got the riba, somebody else earned it. What's haram for you is also haram for someone else to do that on your behalf as well. So it's not allowed for you to hire people over it. So the employee is working for you. The employee works on your behalf. So if he acquires wealth in a haram way, you are acquiring wealth in a haram way because he's working for you. Islam, brothers and sisters, allows us to hire non-Muslims. When it comes to hiring, having an employee, as long as the job itself is allowed, you can employ Muslims or non-Muslims. So the Prophet ﷺ, he hired a Jew as a clerk. He hired polytheists as a guide. Abu Bakr, Siddiq, and Umar, they hired Christians as accountants. When Persia came into Islam, the Zoroastrians, they were accountants, they were tax inspectors. So it's perfectly allowed to hire non-Muslims, but the job that you're hiring them from, that has to be halal for you. Yeah, that's the key thing when we look at this topic, inshallah. So this nicely, brothers, brings us up to the concept of company structure. This is another way to earn wealth as well. And what we find is when we look at the Islamic texts, there are about 5 types of companies that can exist, 5 company structure. And when you set up a company, what you're doing is going into partnership with other people in order to do business activity in order to make a profit. So in a company, you're not an employee. You are the owner of the company. You're not an employee in the company. Whoever the company employs to do a particular job, you pay salary, they're employees. You are the owner. So the rules for being an owner and the rules for being an employee are a bit different. Because when you're an employee, you are not the owner of the business. You are not the business. You are being paid by the business to do a job. So as long as the job you do is halal, it actually doesn't matter what the rest of the business is doing. Whilst if you are a company owner, everything the company does has to be halal. It's not I'm the company owner and what individual staff do, because you're the owner of a company, you are the company. So there's a distinction there. So if we look at the 5 types of companies, you've got the first one, Inan. This is where you have 2 partners, and what they do is they put money into the business and they both work for it. So both of them put money in and both of them distribute the profit when they make money. And the key thing here is both of them have put money in and both of them aim to make a profit from it. The second one you have is Abdan. And here, this is where two people begin to trade in something. Rather than putting money in, it's the skill that comes together. So a doctor, video editors, two consultants. So rather than putting money in, what they do, they've come together and they're going to use a skill they've got in order to make money. And then they agree a profit on how much they're going to distribute it. And then you have the third one, which is the Madara Bar, which is the classic structure. So this is where one partner puts the money in and the other partner works with it. So effectively, the partner that puts the money in is a silent partner. He or she doesn't take part in the day-to-day running of the business. They just put money in. The other partner is the one that deals with the day-to-day running of the business. So what that partner does is they make the decisions. They decide where to spend the money, and they have all the powers on the day-to-day running of the business. The other partner can put some restrictions, but these are like broad level restrictions. The whole idea is one guy puts money in, and then you leave it to the other guy to turn that into a profit, and then you agree how you're going to share the profit, the percentages. And the third one, brothers and sisters, you have wujud. So this is really just an extension of the Madara Bar. The only difference here is one guy puts money in, the other one works with it. But the difference here is that the individual who works in the company, it's his status that's the key thing. So you might have someone who's very rich, and because of his reputation, you get contracts. That's really the distinction there. But other than that, it's really the same as Madara Bar. And then the final one, brothers and sisters, is Mufawada. And this is really a combination of all the rest. This is where, a Madarib comes together and then they go into business with Al-Inan, the first one. Or what you do is some guys put money in and then the other guys, his reputation is what you use to actually work with it. So what you find, brothers and sisters, is these are different types of structures. And as long as what you trade in is halal, you agree a profit distribution, and that's fine. That's how Islamic companies work. Now, this, brothers and sisters, is very different to what we see of the Western companies, what we see of the public limited companies or the company structure that we have in the West. And I'm sure we can discuss this further in the Q&A, but there's 4 points here which are the key problems from an Islamic perspective. The first thing is, brothers and sisters, that the actual contract that brings into existence a company, it is a very different type of contract in origin to an Islamic company contract. The Islamic company contract, they are always beginning with two people, where one person offers something to the other person agrees, now they're a company. In the Western company structure, that is actually not the type of contract the company starts with. They call this a contract of individual will. And what this is just a one-sided contract that you have a company and anybody can buy shares and they become partners. Whilst in Islam, we view company in origin as more than two. It's not a singular thing. A singular thing in Islam is where you just buy and sell stuff and you make a profit. This is the type of contract they view it. So this is a bit of a legalistic discussion. But from that perspective, there's already a major difference. The second one, and probably the most prominent, is corporate personality. Now, when you set up a company, brothers and sisters, I set up a company, it becomes established, it becomes quoted on the stock exchange, or you get a company reference number. What then happens is, brothers, the company has its own personality. It is a person. Legally speaking, it has to pay its own taxes. If you fall down the stairs in the company's building, you do not sue the directors, you sue this corporate personality. And there's a bit of history to this. The reason why this is the case, this goes back to when the Europeans were exploring Latin America. When they were doing this, it was very, very risky. What was going on is explorers would borrow loads of money, and if they didn't find anything in Latin America, in the New World, then they'll be completely indebted. So what they come up with was something legalistic, which was we set up a company and people buy shares in the company by investing. And if they come back successful, they get a share of the profit. If they don't, the company is not liable, not the original founders and their personal wealth. So they separated personal responsibility from the company itself. So this is why we say that the Western concept of company is a corporate structure. It's a corporate personality. It's completely separate. In Islam, we don't view it like that. In Islam, the people who put capital in, they are the company. It's not the company separate to them. The company is not a person. Without somebody running the company, without someone accounting for the company, there would be no company. So this is a major distinction when you look at it from an Islamic perspective. Then the third point, brothers and sisters, there's actually a bit of a debate here. That when the company is formed, people buy shares, right? Now, are you really a partner in a company, or are you really a deputy in a company? And what we mean by that is if we join a company and we're partners, then really one person should equal one vote. But what you find, brothers, is the number of shares you have defines how many votes you have. So what this means is when the company's set up, really what people are doing is they're putting money in, and the partnership is over the money. It's not over how many partners they are. So there's a view out there that really this is not a partnership of people. Really, you're deputies who have put money into a business. And this is a debate that really still continues. And this all comes down to when it comes to making decisions in a company and when it comes to shareholders and voting, it's not one shareholder equals one share. It's actually your vote is based upon the number of shares you have. So really, this is a partnership of money rather than a partnership of people. And then the final problem, and probably the main one, brothers and sisters, is shares. When you buy a share in a company, you become a part owner, you become a partner. And what is supposed to happen is that share entitles you to a part of the profit when the company makes a profit. However, what you find, brothers and sisters, is in the modern day, and for a long time, people buy shares and they don't really care about how much profit the company makes. What they're waiting for, the share price to go up so they can sell the share and make a profit. So what you find today, brothers and sisters, is the shares have got nothing to do with the performance of the company. So I remember, brothers and sisters, if you're old enough, when the internet boom happened, 1999, 2000, what you find is loads of new companies were coming in the stock market and the share price was going through the roof, even though they were not forecasted to make a profit for 10, 15 years. So the shares were completely out of sync with the performance of the company. So the shares no longer represent what's actually going on in the company. What you find with shares is they are in a world of their own and they're completely independent. So shares have become like money. They are really, in fact, most Westerners, they consider shares as a form of money. They consider shares, you're buying and selling money, shares is a type of money, completely divorced from the performance of a company. So these are the problems when you look at the Islamic concept of companies versus the Western idea of companies. So this is really the first area, brothers and sisters, when we look at the 5 different forms of ownership. When we look at work, this was the first way. The second form of ownership, brothers and sisters, is inheritance. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with this. This is the ayah in the Quran from Surah An-Nisa that is the basic building block of inheritance. And the basic building block is, the females, they get half of what the male inherits. So inheritance has got a lot of detailed rules. It's defined in the Hukum Shari. And you have a right to inherit based on what the circumstances are when your parents pass away or any other dependents. So, you're not buying and selling an inheritance. You have a right to receive these amounts by the allotted share. So there's a lot more evidence for this, but this is the main evidence. Where it changes, brothers and sisters, is, there's no men, there's no boys, there's only girls. Or, for example, there's half brothers, half sisters, step brothers, step sisters. Things can change, but the basic rule is when it's inheritance, the daughters get half of what the son gets. So this is something you inherit. There's no you have to pay something and you get inheritance. This is something defined in Islam. So this is a second form of ownership in Islam. The third form, brothers and sisters, is sustenance. As we discussed before, Islam has defined food, clothing, shelter as a basic necessity. You got ayahs and hadith that, there's a basic right, which is for the beggar and the destitute, i.e. for people who cannot fulfill their basic needs, they have a right for sustenance, i.e. they should be given subsistence for free. So you got hadith, any community whosoever they are, if a person among them became hungry, they will be removed from the protection of Allah. And another one, the one who slept satisfied while his close neighbor was hungry, and he was aware of that, he would not have believed in me truly. So what this means is two things. One is these are basic needs. And secondly, there's an order. So, the parents, the kids are expected to take care of them. Your neighbors have a right over you as well. And all of this is their basic needs need to be fulfilled. If they're not, then they have a right to subsistence. So there's an order for this, your children, your family, your relatives, and then your neighbors, and then it goes to the central authority, the state, eventually. So that's subsistence. That's the third one. And the next one, the fourth one, brothers and sisters, is financial transfer. And this is what the state gives of wealth to its citizens. So this is property, mal, which the state, the central authority, takes from the Bait al-Mal to give to its citizens in order for them to meet their needs or in order for the community to benefit from it. So one more famous example of this for Umar Khattab, he gave wealth from the Bait al-Mal to the farmers in Iraq, which helped them to plant land on the seeds and fulfill their needs and their community needs. And he didn't ask for anything back. So this is similar, brothers and sisters, the government giving grants, the government building a park or building a road. All of this is done for free. Now, you may even give housing to individuals because they have no home. This is a fiscal transfer. The key thing here really is this is from the central authority, the government, to the people, to the community. That's what that is, inshallah. And then the final one, brothers and sisters, is the best definition I could find of this is wealth handover. And there is 5 of these. So these are wealth that go to individuals without them having to pay anything in exchange for it. The first one is rewards. If somebody gives you a gift, it's a gift. You don't have to give them anything in response. Spoils of war. If you receive this, it's yours. That's it. It's just a wealth handover. There's no two ways to this contract. It's not, I got to give you something, you got to give me something back. Then you got blood money, brothers. There's many punishments in Islam where the person accused their family can forgive them in return for blood money. Yeah, the dowry in marriage, this is a one-way contract. The husband gives the wife dowry. It's a one-way transaction. So this will be an example of wealth handover. You've got the picked up. So, anything of value you find on the road, there's some rules, but you can become an owner of this as well. And then the final one, brothers and sisters, is recompense to the ruler. Now, the ruler in Islam, the Khalifa, he gets paid for the job. But because he's elected, it's not considered an employer-employee relationship. Because he can't work, because he's the ruler, he is compensated for loss of income. So this is considered wealth handover. It's not an employer-employee relationship. It's not we're giving you a contract, you're our employee, and you got to work 9 to 5. The ruler is elected by us, and therefore it's not a strictly employee-employer relationship. So that, brothers and sisters, is really most of what I wanted to cover today. So these are the 5 types of ownership, brothers and sisters. And as we did, work is probably the biggest aspect of this, yeah, and probably the most important, probably the most relevant to us, inshallah, yeah. So next time, brothers and sisters, we will cover money and finance. But what I will do here, inshallah, we can open it up now for any questions, any views you have. Feel free, brothers and sisters, to put your comment on the chat if you want, or if you like, you can actually make your comment as well. If you just raise your hand, and then I'll give you the mic, inshallah. So I'll just have a look in the chat, see if there's any questions, inshallah. Go ahead. So if I work in a bank, what's the issue of interest there? So with a bank, it was quite clear that the hadith says the one who records, the one who witnesses, the one who receives, the one who gives. So what we're talking about is contracts where riba is based. Now, what you find in a bank, not every role will be haram, because not every role involves riba. However, many of the roles potentially do, and you've got to look at this. You've got to look at each individual contract. So what you got to remember is, even if you do an action which is not haram, but the action can lead to haram, then that would be haram. So we call this the means to haram is haram itself as well. So again, I mean, you have to look at the individual action that you do. But I wouldn't say working in a bank is haram, because not every job in a bank you're witnessing all the contracts and things like that. That's the important thing. And so what I'd advise is, for anyone who works in a bank, have a look at your individual contract, have a look at what you do, and have a look at how involved are you when it comes to riba-based contracts. That's what I would say. I mean, if you've got any specific, we can have a look at that, inshallah. But yeah, that is the general position on that. You got another here. What about Mushraka? So Mushraka and Madara Bar are very similar. Mushraka usually is related to the person that puts the capital in. That's usually called Mushraka, that part of Madara. So Madara Bar is the one who puts the money in and the one who works with it. Mushraka is a term for just the capital side, who's putting money in. And because loads of financial products have emerged over the years, Islamic finance, that's why Mushraka is a very popular form of equity investment. So what you tend to find is, to get around riba-based contracts, what's happening is you have this concept of Mushraka, where what happens is somebody puts money in, and then what you're doing is the payment you make to that person, their ownership declines and your ownership increases. So they call this diminishing Mushraka. So this is allowed, really, as long as the item you're buying is halal. I mean, from an economic perspective, I'm not sure how profitable it really is. However, yeah, it is a legitimate form of ownership in Islam. Okay, just having a look at. Okay, please explain why and why not the so-called Islamic finance provided by several Islamic finance companies like La Riba and Guidance are lined up with Sharia or not. I'm not sure about these in particular. Companies like La Riba and Guidance. Sorry, I'm UK based, so these are not the ones we have in the UK. I mean, what we can do, inshallah, if you put these on the WhatsApp group, I can have a look at them and we can probably discuss them at the beginning of next week. The challenge, brothers and sisters, you have with Islamic finance and loans is the biggest problem is actually profitability. In a normal contract, what you find, brothers and sisters, is you go to a bank, you ask for a mortgage, you get a mortgage, you agree the property is 450K, the bank agrees to give you a loan of 450K, and they say, but the total loan will be 500K. So 450K is the property, and the 50K would be their profit, right? So also the amount you pay back, you don't know how much you're going to pay back on day one. Because the interest rate can change, your loan could potentially go up and down. So if you agreed a loan of 450K, anything extra you pay is riba, right? Now, that's how the banks make their money. Now, the problem with the Islamic finance is they can't do that. The day they give you a loan, they tell you the full amount you're going to pay back, and that can't change. And if it can change, it's not even Islamic. So the problem with this is, if we make a mortgage or loan agreement today, what makes that profitable is it depends on the next 20 years. What will interest rate be like? What will the economy be like? So what many banks have realized is Islamic finance is actually quite risky. So for at least the last 20 years, brothers, the interest rates have been really low. Now, in 20, 30 years' time, if somebody gives you a mortgage, a profit for the bank would be, if interest rates are 10%, well, we made a 40% or 20% profit. So really what you find is it's difficult to make lots of money from Islamic finance, because Islamically, we don't view finance as an industry. Islamically, because of riba being haram, finance really it's not possible to have a financial industry. So many have tried to come up with ways to get around this. And that's why you find, you have Sharia boards, you have scholars on these boards. And what I would say, brothers and sisters, is, it's for you guys to measure. Are they really giving you the hukum shari, or are they trying to make your life easy? And, there's a whole fiqh around this now. Living in the West, we need fiqh of minorities. We have unique circumstances. And really the question you've got to ask is, is my life being made easy, or are they trying to make my life easy, or are they actually giving me the hukum shari? And that's what you've got to really look at here, inshallah. Okay, got another question here. Explanation, gharar, unknown definition, and maybe a few other areas of application, such as insurance and Bitcoin. What's the difference between gharar and selling stone throw? Because with both, it is unclear at the conclusion of the contract what would be acquired concretely. Okay, so gharar is a term in Islam. It's a key condition in Islam that what we're buying or selling, it has to be known. So it needs to be defined where it's very clear by both of us what it is we're buying and selling. So, like you get in the West, we don't have things like, many of the contracts have so much small blueprint. It's so small that you actually don't know what you're getting into. So insurance actually is in one of those areas, funny enough, because in insurance, you're agreeing with someone you're going to have an accident with, who you haven't had an accident with yet, that I will pay you or compensate you if we and when we have an accident. So the whole contract is over a future incident that hasn't happened. So what this concept does, it completely cuts out all the ways companies make money, where they speculate, where they're making money from things that have not happened or out of the misfortune of people. Now, we don't have this in Islam. When we're buying or selling, really, to a large degree, it has to be known what you're buying and selling over. There are rules for things like fruits and vegetables that are not on their trees yet. There are rules for this. But yeah, in Islam, it has to be very, very clearly defined. So some scholars have said you have to define it by its description, its weight, or its other characteristics. You can't just leave it to a generic broad thing. So you mentioned here about Bitcoin. Bitcoin we'll talk about next week, inshallah, because we're going to talk about money. So we'll have a talk about cryptocurrencies and these sort of things. Okay, it said, please elaborate on mufawada. Yeah, you mentioned something about reputations. That's a good question. I'm not sure how much more I can add. The main thing with mufawada is it's really similar to a Madara Bar. Let me just go back to companies. There we go. Mufawada. So it's really a combination of the others. So you could have, for example, Madara Bar merging with another type of business. You could have it in that particular way. So what this, because the other four are allowed, having combinations of all four are also allowed as well. So I'm trying to think of some examples where this could happen today. The examples that come to my mind is where two companies merge, but they have different structures. Or it could actually be a wajul company of reputation goes into business with a Madara Bar type business. So because they're individually permissible, even combined, they would be permissible as well. Islamic, am I wrong to practice? But acrobatic meaning. Okay, we've got another question here. Islamic banks are not Islamic. Am I wrong to say that the practice is nothing but an acrobatic maneuvering of the terms? There is definitely a lot of that. See, what I would say that, look, banking isn't haram itself. You know, banking, storing your money, investing, storing your money somewhere, getting credit, getting a debit card type of service, check service, that's all permissible. That's not actually un-Islamic. The issue with banking is modern banking is all based around riba. That would be haram. So what you find is, yeah, there is a lot of acrobatic. In fact, without the acrobatics, it's very difficult for them to halalify banking. So that is a huge issue. So there is a lot of that. The position I usually take is I don't paint a brush over all of banking. What I say is each individual contract, look at it on its own terms. That's probably a better way. However, and then also you've got one thing, is it halal? The main condition you're going to find for most banks is, can they make a profit? So they start from, we need to create a product we can make a profit. Then they get a Sharia board, can you halalify it? They work that, they don't work the other way, which is the product in halal in origin? It is. If it's halal, okay, how do we turn it into a profit? They do the other way around, because banks are fundamentally profit-making businesses. So there is a lot of acrobatics, actually. I've read all sorts of stuff from when Islamic finance first came around. I know there are different views amongst Muslims. For some Muslims, it's impossible. The term Islam and banking being in the same sentence. You've got others, it is possible with millions of buts and ifs. You've got that as well. So I would say, look at each contract on its own terms, and you can judge from there. And you can basically apply just basic Islamic principles. Do you know how much you're going to pay back from day one? Can that change? If you say a no straight away, that's haram in origin. Forget the rest. You don't even need to look at it then. Okay, earning money from YouTube comes under what category of work? Why they pay the users? Is it halal or haram? So really, YouTube is really hiring. What you're doing is two things. You're either creating videos and you're putting it on YouTube. And what Google are doing is they're going to pay you in order to advertise. So this comes under work. But the difference here is you're providing a service. You're providing something intangible. You're not providing a physical good. So this is similar to a doctor. When a doctor does his job, he's not physically providing a good. So there's two things. Either Google's paying you. What Google's paying you is just to advertise on your video. So what Google are doing, they're hiring you. Can we use your video to advertise? And they'll pay you depending on the number of people that see you. So that's allowed. I'm not sure everything on YouTube is allowed. You've got to check. With some of these contracts, some of the fine print is really, really questionable. And unfortunately, what you're getting sometimes now is, what is the actual physical product or service you're being paid for? Sometimes literally it's something that may happen, something that's going to happen, these sort of things. Yeah, so that's there. Also, concerning hiring non-Muslims, is it a must that there is a dress code that must be followed? No, so you've got to be careful here. When you hire someone, as long as the work they do for you is halal, is fine. Yeah. How they look, do they have a beard, do they cover or not? That's individual obligation upon individual Muslim that they're accountable for. So it's not, even if you hire a Muslim, it's an obligation on them to pray and fast. It's not an obligation upon you. You should remind them. You should enjoin the good, forbid the evil. But it's not, if they're not practicing Muslims, you can't employ them. Because you're practicing the deen of Islam is an individual obligation upon every Muslim. Hiring someone, they just need to fulfill their terms of the contract. That's how it is. However, broadly speaking, we are obliged to enjoin the good, forbid the evil. So that is, you explain to them, you should pray, brother. or sister you should cover, but you're not accountable beyond that. They're accountable for following the rules of Islam, because if that's the case, then really you can't employ anyone unless they're practicing Islam completely. Yeah, and the fact that we can hire non-Muslims, yeah. Now, obviously, they're not allowed to use haram means, yeah. So what they can't do is lie. Yeah, they can't do these sort of things. They can't be lying and they can't be making things up. You're still accountable for that. But other, how they dress and these sort of things, you're not accountable for. That's individual obligation, inshallah. Is a Muslim allowed to accept inheritance from non-Muslim parents? As far as I know, there's ikhtilaf on this, actually. I'm not sure it's considered inheritance. I think because non-Muslims can give you money, you're allowed to take it. So if your parents were non-Muslims and they give you money, I think we may just consider that that's someone giving you money. We may not consider it inheritance. Yeah. But let me check that. I think there's ikhtilaf on this. But as far as I know, you can take money from non-Muslims. Whether it's inheritance, whether they just like you, whether they're a good neighbor, they want to give you some money, you're allowed to take it because money's halal and you can take money from anyone. So even if it's inheritance, I think it should be, but I'll check that for you. I know there was ikhtilaf of it. Is drop shipping and investing in stocks and shares halal? Look, my opinion is it's not halal to buy shares, because by buying shares, you become part owner of a company, and therefore the company needs to be halal from Islamic perspective. As company structures in the West are not halal structures, you become owner of a structure that Islamically is not allowed. I know there are other views out there. I haven't looked at them in depth, but that's the position I take. That by owning a share, you become part owner of a company. So what you own has to be halal. And the Western company, as I mentioned, there's 4 points that really create a major problem for us. Okay, brothers, that's all the questions on the chat. I don't see any hand up, inshallah, and it's been about an hour. So if there's nothing more, we can end there, inshallah. If you do have any questions or any comments, brothers and sisters, I think put it on the WhatsApp group, and then we could pick that up when we start first next week. But next week we'll cover money and finance, inshallah. And we can have a bit more of a look into Islamic finance and things like that as well, inshallah. Okay, we got a last minute question.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Go for it, brother, inshallah.
I just wanted to ask, is your opinion on drop shipping, would that be is that halal or haram?
Just quickly, just explain to me what drop shipping is, brother. I think I understand what it is.
It's like when people they find a wholesaler of a product, and then they advertise that product on a different website, and then they sell that product to people, but then they just move it from the wholesaler's website to the person's address.
Okay, put that in the group. I just need to think about that, yeah? But just put it on the WhatsApp group. Let me have a look at it, yeah?
Okay.
So it's one of those ones you can't, there's a few things I need to understand. It's not one of those you can just give a quick answer.
Okay. Jazakallah khair.
Barakallah fi. Barakallah fi. Okay, I think that's it. So let's end this. Any questions, brothers and sisters, put it on the group. I will pick them up first thing next week, inshallah. Okay, all the best, brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum.